What if I told you that every single one of us, every single person on this entire earth, whether we like it or not, are in a cult right now? What would you say what would happen? And what if I told you that ever since you were born, that what your parents have said to you, what your friends have said to you, is language and grammar used to indoctrinate you into a system that you never even were aware of. And the worst part, and the worst part was that this cult doesn't have a church. Not a single building. Because it's everywhere. From your house to the buildings you go, everywhere. So I'd like to introduce myself. Hi, my name is Solace, and in this series called The Cult of the Patriarchy, I will be breaking down how the patriarchy indoctrinates us into this system, and how these cults and how these systems act similarly, and I would even go to as far and say they are indeed cults, as they use indoctrination and brainwashing to convince their audience and the congregation that their beliefs are nothing but fact. Now, in order for this is just the first video, it's an introduction into this topic. Now, this topic is something that I was thinking about yesterday, and it was something that I've been thinking about for a real long time, but I just never got to plan it. So I have a book with me with all my notes. I know, don't be scared. I will try and summarize these notes easily so you can understand, right? So essentially, right, the patriarchy literally means rule of the father and refers to a social system whereby men uphold power over women, right? But the patriarchy in itself is a system, right? It's a system. It's abstract. We cannot point there and say that's patriarchal and that's patriarchal, or that's the patriarchy, or that's the church of the patriarchy, because it's an abstract idea that infects almost every single part of our lives. And if you kind of think about it, that's scary. To some extent, it would be a god or a deity or even a demon. And the reason why I'm comparing it to these things is because it has no physical body or entity. We perpetuate it. And the way we support and feed into this god or deity of patriarchy is misogyny. Misogyny is the fuel that the patriarchy runs on, essentially. But what is misogyny? Misogyny is the prejudice, contempt, or hatred of women or feminine characteristics in general, right? Or that's rather femphobia. Femphobia and misogyny are very closely related but slightly different. But I'll delve into that in the next video, right? Or in the video that's to come to follow up this video, right? Now, how does misogyny and the patriarchy relate, right? Well, the first part is when it comes to the devaluation of femininity. And I think we experience this as boys because we often say, okay, boys don't cry, and if you do cry, you're a sissy, right? The feminine expression has negative connotations regardless of which gender there is. Because if you are a girl who cries, you are overtly emotional, or psychopathic or emotionally unstable because you cannot control your emotions. But if both boys and girls can't cry, then what was the problem in the first place? The problem always stemmed from the hatred of emotional expression due to the fact that it's tied with femininity. And one thing we hate is femininity. We often look down on girls that like traditionally female things, that like the color pink and are naive and play with Barbies, and we'll say, well, that's just a sissy, or that's just childish, and we tie negative connotations, even if it is a woman, doing all these things, right? And here I wrote, patriarchal societies inherently overvalue traits traditionally associated with masculinity. Examples are rationality, stoicism, and aggression, and devalue those associated with femininity, e.g., sensitivity and vulnerability. This lays the groundwork for misogynistic attitudes to, exist in societies, within conversations, within the way your parents treat you, right? And it's quite a big issue that we do face in South Africa and within the entire world. Again, I really do see patriarchy as a demon because it truly can go anywhere. And then the reinforcement of gender roles, this is quite simple, right? We often don't like seeing women dominating in male-dominated spaces and vice versa, right? And when we challenge these gender roles, we often face backlash and criticism due to the fact that they're out there and, you know, they face backlash and they think that people, both men and women, should stay in their place. But in this system, men have more freedom than women, right? And now I'd like to go to explain that the social and parental roles, right? And this leads to the differential treatment. And I remember as a kid, right? Like not being able to cook and clean. And even now I still struggle with those things. I do know how to cook, I do know how to clean, I'm not best at those things, but there was a different treatment I observed with my female counterparts because that was the only thing they were taught to do. I was encouraged to get into fights and to go play with my friends while, you know, my female counterparts were encouraged to stay in the house and clean, right? I was encouraged to get into relationships and, you know, have sex, and women were encouraged not to. But we'll get into virginity and why it's a really stupid concept, and it low-key devalues women as a whole by placing their value in between their legs. But we'll get there, right? Then emotional restriction, right? And the biggest example right here is boys are frequently taught to suppress emotions such as sadness, fear, or vulnerability with phrases like boys don't cry or man up. This limits the emotional range and encourages stoicism, as emotional expression is often perceived as feminine weakness. And that's why a lot of y'all can't communicate with your boyfriends, because your boyfriend does not have the emotional range to understand why you are feeling the way you're feeling.
Time to get up! Time to get up!
And this is due to the patriarchy and the fact that boys are told and are indoctrinated to have a limited emotional range. Your man's not going to understand why you cracked out by the fact that he kissed another girl. And we're going to get into that, but later. Then the encouragement of independence and aggression. A lot of boys, when they're young, they are encouraged to have bodily autonomy. They're given more money, and they are given more independence to make decisions about their hair and what they want. And this is in comparison, obviously, to girls who are often under strict rule of their mothers. You have to do this, you have to do that. And maybe I'm not explaining it as clearly, but again, this is just an overview or an introduction into what we'll be delving into the series, right? And then in education and syllabuses, right? In education systems, syllabuses may glorify male historical figures whilst invisibilizing female figures. This subliminally reinforces the misogynistic thought that women are inferior to men, so much so that they do not contribute to world history. We've heard of Leonardo da Vinci, we've heard of, Picasso, we've heard of Albert Einstein, we've heard of Isaac Newton, because these are very significant male figures. But what about their female counterparts? Queen Elizabeth, babe, she's existed. No one knows about the fact that Mozart's sister was actually the one who helped him play the piano initially. And this is done as to erase women from the equation, so people don't actually think women contribute to the world in that way. And mind you, this is in school whereby both men and women are taught and raised. Both men and women are indoctrinated by the patriarchy, and they're not split into different rooms. Patriarchy is really genderless, and this is why it's scary, because it's abstract. It's genderless, it doesn't care about sexuality, race, and demographic background, whether you're poor or rich or middle class. It does not care where you come from and what continent you're on. As long as you're on this earth, the patriarchy is going to find you and indoctrinate you. And if you do not subject yourself, or if you do not submit yourself to this system, you'll face backlash, you'll get made fun of, and you'll have limited opportunities, in which is really sad, but that's the way it ensures that you will be stuck in the system. And then we're going to talk about media and popular culture. Stereotypical portrayals. Media, video games, and advertisements consistently portray men in roles that emphasize strength, rationality, leadership, and heroism, often devoid of complex emotional lives, e.g. Superman and Batman. Very similar characters despite having different backgrounds. These are both men who lack emotional range, right? they can't have emotions, and that Superman is one of the biggest role models for a lot of boys growing up, and he's a bad role model because essentially the man doesn't have emotions, right? And maybe it's a very complex debate, but he's the simplest example that I can give here. While women are frequently depicted in supportive domestic or objectified roles, such as Cassie from Euphoria or Harley Quinn from, DC. And then the glorification of violence and dominance. Many narratives glorify physical power, aggression, and conquest, aligning these traits with what it means to be a real man. Predatory or disrespectful behavior towards women might be normalized or even presented as humorous. And this is very sad, as we often see SA jokes in film and television, now more garnered to men than women nowadays, but still SA is SA regardless of the gender. But these portrayals and laughing at SA jokes and laughing at girls who are bops just further perpetuate these misogynistic attitudes, especially on these online platforms such as TikTok. TikTok is locally turning into Twitter, but that's another conversation, babes. And then limited masculinities. The media often presents a narrow version of masculinity, making it very difficult for boys to explore diverse expressions of their identity without feeling like they are failing to be men. And I often see this a lot with my friends who are genuinely just trying to live their life but don't perpetuate these misogynistic attitudes and then are pressured, forced, or made fun of due to the fact that they're just human and they treat women like humans instead of objects. And it's quite sad, but it is a reality for a lot of men out there. And unless you submit to these systems, they will make fun of you and you will have limited opportunities to. And I think isolation and social, what do you call this? Social, what do you call it? Not desolation, social, when you're ostracized by community, it's the worst punishment that the patriarchy can give you due to the fact that you don't want to submit to it. And then language and symbolism, gendered language such as male-centric terms such as e.g. mankind for all humanity often associates positive attributes to masculinity and negative ones to femininity. This one is within the language that we use, the cuss words that we use, we often see a lot of derogatory terms referring to women and a lot less derogatory terms referring to men. Derogatory terms are just derogatory, like don't use them in general, but we often see that bitch, cunt, are often used, and fag are often used to, used to degrade people who exude feminine features. And then we can talk about religion, but religion's gonna have to be its own mini series, okay? But yes, religion often, glorifies male figures and literally making God a man, despite God actively saying he's not a man, but go off. He does not exist in the Hebrew language, but this more deals with Christianity than anything, but all religions do this, by the way. All religions kind of indoctrinate you. And you see the many sectors in which the patriarchy indoctrinates you is really sad, though. But hopefully we can get to a better future. Now, this is just a short summary and overview. It's not gonna be... The video essays are really gonna come when I delve into each sector individually. So like and subscribe if you want that. It's me, Solace, and hopefully you like the new name. And I will be introducing search soon, but wait for that. I love you. Please like, subscribe, and comment, and see you next time.